Hey, good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Hey, don't forget the three-book special. Here we are, December 12th. I think that's right. and time's running out to take advantage of this very, very special three books special. Go to my website, donkpreston.com. All right? We're looking at Jesus' statement, what many they considered almost a passing reference. And there's no question whatsoever that it is a wartime reference. All right? As you look at the commentators, as you look at the literature, you very quickly realize that it was well understood that in the ancient world, this language, where the carcass is, there will the birds be gathered. Now, it applied to any time you got a dead body, but the point of fact is, it was regularly used to speak of a time of warfare. Just like the imagery, just like William Lane in his commentary on Mark chapter 13 talks about, the language and the imagery of casting down the stones was the language of warfare, invasion. When cities were captured, they were dismantled so that they could never be a fortress again. So I'm not denying by any stretch of the imagination that Jesus' reference in Matthew 24:28 was taken from a literal, well-known metaphoric context, right? A concrete context as well. What I've been sharing with you is that in prophecy, we have the prophecies of the last days, destruction and death of Israel, that would result in the new creation. Now think about that, all right? If it's the case, and it is the case, that Isaiah predicted the death of Israel to bring in the new creation. Now, on the one hand, the death of Israel would be horrific, horrible, horrible news. On the other side of it, it was absolutely great news. And by the way, that's why I wrote this book. It's coming out in paperback very soon. Lord willing, nothing happens. The gospel of destruction. How could Jesus say that the fall of Jerusalem was this gospel, this good news of the kingdom? After all, it was horrible, horrific. Yes, it was. But out of the horror came wholeness. Out of the death came the resurrection to life. And so be looking for this. By the way, many of you have asked me to put that Kindle book into paperback form. It's coming, all right? So I've shared with you these Old Testament prophecies of the death of Israel in the last days. What I want to do now is to share with you that here we are talking about Matthew chapter 24. It's about Israel. Because it would be Israel, Judah specifically, that would commit the horrible abomination of desolation, resulting in the great tribulation, covenantal judgment on Israel, resulting in the death of Israel, precisely like Isaiah 65 foretold. Now, as promised, I want to take you to Revelation. Revelation chapter 18 and 19. Now understand that Revelation 18 and 19 are a recapitulation of earlier chapters, of earlier visions. It's all one vision in different forms. But in chapter 18, we have the impending destruction of Jerusalem. Why? Or Babylon. We'll get to that in a moment. Why? Well, because she's holding a golden cup full of the blood of the martyrs of God and of the saints. Revelation 17 and 16. The cup of her sin for persecuting the saints was now just about full. Let me see. Jesus said Jerusalem would fill up the measure of her father's guilt for persecuting the prophets, killing his apostles, his prophets in that generation. Matthew 23. Here is John, who's still living in that generation, talking about Babylon, and she's holding a cup full of the blood of the martyrs that she has slain, the martyrs of Jesus. In chapter 18, we are given the magnificent description of the beauty of that temple. By the way, may I recommend my book, Who is This Babylon? Many people try to go to Revelation chapter 18 and they say, oh, this can't be Jerusalem because of the description. No, everything in Revelation 18 fits Jerusalem to a T. Perfectly. And the lament, get this, catch the power of this, the lament of chapter 18 over the impending destruction of Babylon is taken directly from the book of Lamentations. In my book, Who is This Babylon, I adduce something like 22 direct parallels between the book of Lamentations and Revelation. John is following Jeremiah's lament over the fall of Jerusalem in 586 BC. He follows it like a road map. And that is incredible evidence to prove that Revelation was about the impending fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. Chapter 19, we have the depiction of the coming of the Son of Man, just like in Matthew chapter 24, verse 27. For as the lightning flashes from the east to the west, so also shall the coming of the Son of Man be. For, connective particle, where the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered. Revelation 19, the coming of Jesus, the Son of Man, a great sword coming out of his mouth that was written on his thigh. A message, King of Kings, Lord of Lords. Oh, and then let me see. Verse 17. I saw an angel standing in the sun, cried out with a loud voice, saying, to all of the birds that fly in the midst of heaven, come and gather together for the supper of the great God, that you may eat the flesh of the kings, the flesh of the captains, the flesh of the mighty men, the flesh of horses and of those who sit on them, the flesh of all people, free and slave, both small and great. And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to make war against him who sat on the horses and against his army. Then the beast was captured, with him the false prophet who worked signs in his presence, by which he deceived those who received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped his image. These were cast alive into the lake of fire burning with brimstone. The rest were killed with the sword which proceeded from the mouth of him who sat on the horse, and all the birds were filled with their flesh. What's the carcass? What's the body? Babylon. Who was Babylon? It was the city that killed the prophets, the Old Covenant prophets. Guess what, folks? Rome never killed an Old Testament prophet. The Roman Catholic Church never killed a Old Covenant prophet. Literal Iraq, or literal Babylon in literal Iraq, never killed an Old Covenant prophet. Oh, and let's see. Islam never killed an Old Testament prophet. And thus Jonathan Cahn's identification of Babylon as Islam is wrong. So Babylon was the city that killed the Old Covenant prophets. It is, quote, where the Lord was slain. Let me see, where was that? Islam had nothing to do with that. Nothing whatsoever to do with that. Roman Catholic Church is not where the Lord was slain. Rome is not where the Lord was slain. Oh, and finally, Babylon is the city that killed the apostles and prophets of Jesus. Who did Jesus say was going to kill his apostles and prophets? Oh, that would be Jerusalem. Matthew chapter 23. Behold, I send to you apostles, prophets, wise men. Some of them you shall crucify and scourge and chase from city to city, that upon you may come all of the righteous blood of all the righteous shed on the earth, from righteous Abel onward. So in Matthew chapter 24, Jesus was talking about the impending judgment on Jerusalem because she would commit the abomination of desolation. The great tribulation would come on her, leading to her death, and the carcass, of her dead body. Revelation depicts the judgment on Babylon, the city where the Lord was slain, and the birds of the air coming and eating the flesh of that dead corpse. Folks, I'm telling you, this is powerful, powerful stuff. Oh, and by the way, brings up the issue tomorrow, Friday, I'm going to continue my review and refutation of Lance Conley's book, Hope Resurrected. Now, Mr. Conley says that there's really some pretty good evidence, some, quote, decent evidence for the early dating of the book of Revelation. But guess what? He takes the late date. We'll be talking about that tomorrow. But it raises a question. What's the dead body to which the eagles would be gathered? If Mr. Conley puts it off in the future, he's got to identify that body, and he's got to deny that Babylon was where the Lord was slain. He's got to deny the fact that Babylon killed old covenant prophets, which no future entity can do. Oh, and he must identify that yet future Babylon as the city that killed the apostles and prophets of Jesus, even though Jesus said, not possible for a prophet to perish outside of Jerusalem. Luke 11, 49 and following. So you don't want to miss it tomorrow as we continue our examination and refutation of Mr. Conley's book. You're going to be kind of amazed at really kind of how sloppy he approaches the entire subject. Really kind of a sad situation, but it is what it is. So I hope you've been able to see what we have laid before you, that Jesus' reference to where the body is, where the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered. It's not simply an incidental reference. It's not some in-passing allusion. No, it had an Old Covenant prophetic background to it. That Old Covenant Israel was going to be slain, and the New Jerusalem and the new creation would come from that. Just like in Revelation, the destruction of Babylon leads to what? The new heaven, the new earth, the new Jerusalem. This is such a beautiful, harmonious, biblical narrative. And it's absolutely stunning to me and sad when you have people that are willing to set that aside, even though they once believed it, supposedly, even though they once believed it, and now they say, oh, there's some decent evidence, decent arguments for the early date, but we don't accept that. We're going to make arguments, not from the Bible, but we're going to make arguments from church history. I'm sorry. I'm going to reject that approach every single time, and you'll see why on the flip side. I'll see you there.